I am still reeling from what I watched this morning on C-SPAN and MSNBC. I kept flipping back and forth. The hearing of the so-called security team, national security team of the orange toilet rat. And I'm going to get into that momentarily and share with you what Jeffrey Goldberg has written at Atlantic Magazine. But I'm just stunned about the incompetence and the criminality and the insanity of these fuckers that Trump has put in charge of U.S. security. It's just, well, I know you have seen this and heard about this all day long. When I woke up this morning and found out that there was going to be a hearing about what these traitorous fucks did to the United States, the national security team, and what a display of incompetence and lies and filth and deception these five people displayed who were sitting before the Senate committee this morning. What a group of bastards. Tulsi Gabbard, who is, I don't know about this woman. Either she's on some very stiff drugs that has frozen her face. Her face is like a goddamn rictus, where it's frozen into a look to me that looks like halfway between contempt and disinterest. There she sat during the 3 hours of this hearing with this frozen fucking face, no matter what was asked of her. And unbelievably, I think she may have exceeded the record set during the Iran-Contra hearings by the traitorous filth to the U.S. military, Oliver North, in answering over and over and over again, I don't recall, I don't recall, I don't recall, I don't recall. It was a combination of the Watergate hearings. I know you're not old enough for that, but I am. The Watergate hearings and the Iran-Contra hearings. I don't recall. I don't recall. The fucking director of national intelligence, and she wouldn't even admit that she was on the call, even though it is a matter of public record that she was on the call, thanks to Jeffrey Goldberg at the Atlantic Magazine. Thank God for him. Kash Patel, that miserable fucker who sat on the panel with his, I don't know, I know you're not supposed to make ad hominem attacks, Malloy, but I can't help it. He looks like something that just crawled out of a fallen log deep in a forest someplace. It's been laying on the ground for 10 years. Oh! And this asshole Ratcliffe, the director of the CIA, who could not answer any fucking question honestly, straightforwardly, with any dignity or the director of the CIA, the director of national intelligence, the director of the FBI, and two military fuckwads who sat as bookends on this panel, refusing to admit that putting out operational information about an impending attack on another country did not constitute classified information. I'm having a hard time managing these sentences. Jesus Christ. But I can understand, and Michael Waltz, the national security advisor to the toilet rat, who Trump has already forgiven. Well, he's learned his lesson. What the fuck does that mean? What these people did, specifically what they did, actually what they did, was put at risk every single military person who was involved in that attack on Yemen last week. The airstrikes, the missile strikes. I mean, here the United States, the security apparatus, the heads of the security apparatus and the military were discussing on an unsecured chat group operational plans to invade a foreign country. And this bitch, Gabbard, this incompetent fuck, Tulsi Gabbard, sat there and said, well, there's no classified information in our discussion. Well, if that's the truth, Gabbard, and Mike Warner, Senator Warner, who was the ranking member, kept saying to her, well, if there's no classified information, release the transcript of what occurred. And this fucking Putin sympathizer, Tulsi Gabbard, who belongs in goddamn Russia, is where she belongs. Go live there, bitch, where you can live under the kind of dictator that you seem to worship in the orange toilet rat. But she would not even answer. I'm surprised she answered her fucking name. And as far as Ratcliffe, the director of the CIA, what just mind-boggling. Now consider this, because I'm sure we all have. Supposing, just supposing, I can't hardly form the thought. Supposing Joe Biden was president and this happened. I mean, look at the shit that these bums stirred up when Hillary Clinton, it was discovered that Hillary Clinton was using her own computer to transmit government information, none of which was classified or had too much to do with anything. But you remember how they went fucking crazy? But imagine if Kamala Harris were president right now, and this kind of shit would have occurred on her watch. These cockroaches in these Christian cockroaches in the House and the Senate would be screaming for her blood. They would be demanding impeachment. But this group of son of a bitches who genuflect in front of Trump are saying nothing, not a fucking word, nothing. And those slimy son of a bitches on that Senate panel, especially Tom Cotton, who, you know, the Archibald, what do I call him? Not Archibald, but the guy that wrote The Headless Horseman. That's who he reminds me of. He looks like the Headless Horseman with a head. But if you listen to the testimony, and there weren't that many Republicans who showed up for the hearing. Oh, fuck no. They're not going to show up. But if you listen to the kinds of questions, first of all, they tried to avoid this issue completely. They wanted to talk about China and rare earths. They wanted to talk about China and artificial intelligence. And China is kicking the ass of the United States right now in several areas. And yes, the people who have said this is the China century, they're fucking absolutely right. But there sat these scumballs, these Christian cowardly pricks, just terrified. They would be afraid that they would be questioning Jesus if they questioned the toilet rat. And there they sat. So the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, he wrote in an article that was published online this morning. Oh, Jesus, is it an article? And he pointed out that he was mistakenly added to the text chat on a commercial messaging app, Signal, and he was put there by Trump's fucked up national security advisor, this Michael Waltz asshole. I don't know if these people are, what excels in their makeup, their stupidity, their ignorance, their dedication to this filthy fucker, Donald Trump, the fact that they are, if they're not already, certainly are now, assets to the murderous Vladimir Putin. There's no way to tell. Because everything that this group of miscreants has done up to this point has been vile and filthy and anti-American and goddammit treasonous, especially what they did last week. Jesus Christ Almighty. Let me share with you a little bit of what was written by Jeffrey Goldberg, I'm sorry. All right, where is it? I just couldn't believe this. This is what Jeffrey wrote, and I'm going to share most of this with you. So, if you subscribe to The Atlantic, this will be repetitious. But here goes. This is what Jeffrey Goldberg wrote this morning. Actually, last night. The world found out shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern Time on March 15th that the United States was bombing Houthi targets across Yemen. I, however, knew 2 hours before the first bombs exploded that the attack might be coming. The reason I knew this is that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, had texted me the war plan at 11:44 a.m. on March 15th. The plan included precise information about weapons, packages, targets, and timing. This is going to require some explaining. The story technically begins shortly after the Hamas invasion of southern Israel in October 2023. The Houthis, which, by the way, is an Iran-backed terrorist organization whose motto is, "God is great, death to America, death to Israel, curses on the Jews, victory to Islam." They soon launched attacks on Israel and on international shipping, creating havoc for global trade. Throughout 2024, the Biden administration was ineffective in countering these Houthi attacks. The incoming Trump administration promised a tougher response. And this is where Pete Hegseth and I come in. On Tuesday, March 11th, I received a connection request on Signal from a user identified as Michael Waltz. Signal is an open-source, encrypted messaging service popular with journalists and others who seek more privacy than other text messaging services are capable of delivering. I assumed that the Michael Waltz in question was President Donald Trump's national security advisor. I did not assume, however, that the request was from the actual Michael Waltz. I met him in the past, and I thought I didn't find it, and though I didn't find it particularly strange that he might be reaching out to me, I did think that it was somewhat unusual given the Trump administration's contentious relationship with journalists and Trump's periodic fixation on me specifically. It immediately crossed my mind that someone could be masquerading as Waltz in order to somehow entrap me. It is not at all uncommon these days for nefarious actors to try to induce journalists to share information that could be used against them. I accepted the connection request, hoping that this was the actual national security advisor and that he wanted to chat about Ukraine or Iran or some other important matter. 2 days later, Thursday, at 4:28 p.m., I received a notice that I was to be included in a Signal chat group. It was called the Houthi PC Small Group. A message to the group from Michael Waltz read as follows, quote, "Team establishing a principals group for coordinating on Houthi, particularly for over the next 72 hours. My deputy, Alex Wong, is pulling together a Tiger team at Deputies Agency Chief of Staff level, following up from the meeting in the Situation Room this morning for action items, and will be sending that out later this evening," end quote. The message continued, quote, "Please provide the best staff POC from your team for us to coordinate with over the next couple days and over the weekend. Thanks," end quote. The term principals committee generally refers to a group of the senior-most national security officials, including the Secretaries of Defense, State, and the Treasury, as well as the Director of the CIA. It should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that I have never been invited to a White House Principals Committee meeting, and that in my many years of reporting on national security matters, I had never heard of one being convened over a commercial messaging app. 1 minute later, a person identified only as MAR, the Secretary of State is Marco Antonio Rubio, MAR wrote, quote, "Mike Needham for State," apparently designating the current counselor of the State Department as his representative. At the same moment, a Signal user identified as J.D. Vance wrote, quote, Andy Baker for VP. 1 minute after that, TG, presumably Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, or someone masquerading as her, wrote Joe Kent for DNI. 9 minutes later, Scott B., apparently Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, or someone spoofing his identity, wrote Dan Katz for Treasury. At 4:53 p.m., a user called Pete Hegseth wrote Dan Caldwell for DOD. And at 6:43 p.m., Brian wrote Brian McCormick for National Security Council. One more person responded. John Ratcliffe wrote at 5:24 p.m. with the name of the CIA official to be included in the group. I'm not publishing that name because that person is an active intelligence officer. The principals had apparently assembled for this meeting. In all, 18 individuals were listed as members of this group, including various National Security Council officials. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's Middle East and Ukraine negotiator. Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, and someone identified only as SM, which I took to stand for Stephen Miller. I appeared on my own screen only as JG. That was the end of the Thursday text chain. All right, now there's much more here. I'm going to have to take a break here in a moment. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.